For a third straight season, TCU basketball's year comes to an end in the first weekend of the NCAA tournament, but not in the second round. This year was in the first round. They got upended by the Mountain West champion Utah State Aggies. 88-72 was your final score. We'll talk about it more next here on Lockdown Horned Frogs. It's your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Basketball season, at least for the men, is officially over. The women continuing to play in the WBIT. They beat North Texas in their first round matchup on Thursday, but the TCU men, they took on Utah State in the first round of the NCAA tournament tonight, and Jamie Dixon's team fell to the Aggies by a final score of 88-72. A really rough night defensively for their Frogs. Also turned the ball over. They ended up with 13 turnovers, I think, on the night. I got the box score in front of me, so kind of bear with me as I try to read through some of those. 14 turnovers on the night total. But they were all really careless, and they all seemed to come at bad times in the ball game. And so they were really costly for TCU as they started to pile up through the game. A real up and down year for this group. You know, early in January, coming off a huge big win or a couple of big wins, they beat Oklahoma early in conference play by a pretty wide margin. At that time, Oklahoma was ranked. And then they beat Houston at home in a tight game, you know, had some great possessions down the stretch. And Houston looks like they might be the best team in the country. You know, UConn might have something to say about that. We'll see what Purdue does. They take on Utah State next. But really, since the month of February, this team has struggled mightily against good teams. And the last big win for this group was probably on the road against Baylor. I mean, that's the last team that I can think of that is probably a group that's going to make the second weekend of the NCAA tournament that they handled their business against. They struggled against Iowa State. They really struggled against Houston, their second matchup in the Big 12 tournament. Tonight, matching up with a good Utah State team. I think Danny Sprinkle's a really good coach. I was impressed with him tonight. I was impressed with the adjustments that he made. And Utah State looked like a well-coached basketball team. They didn't turn the ball over a lot. They were very efficient. They hunted mismatches all night long, especially in the paint, and they just really bullied TCU on the inside. And I knew going into it that Great Osabor was going to be a problem because you watched it when you saw Utah State this season in highlights and in games. Really big at 6'8", 240, handles himself well in the paint. And really, I mean, I compared him at one point on Twitter to he's like a running back that seeks out contact. It's almost like he was better once he got hit. He really knows how to finish around the rim. So he did some nice things. But honestly, the guy that Ian Martinez had a really good day at the guard position too. But man, Isaac Johnson came into this ball game averaging 6.5 points a game. And he just did TCU in from all three levels of the offense. I mean, he really worked against Jamie Plunkett mentioned this multiple times during the game tonight. TCU was switching everything, you know, so on screens they were matching up, they were switching, and Utah State just did a really great job of finding those mismatches and allowing their big men to go to work inside. So Johnson kept matching up against smaller players and doing whatever he wanted against them. He also stepped outside and hit a couple threes. There was a short time in that ball game where TCU switched to his own defense, which is something that Utah State had kind of switched in and out of throughout the game. TCU went to it, and Johnson immediately just hit a deep three, like right from the top of the key. And after that, it was like they almost automatically switched back out. And I was perplexed by that because honestly, I didn't think it was like I thought that was one of their better defensive possessions of the night. They forced a tough shot. He just hit it. Darius Brown also hit like a crazy three at the end of the shot clock. But there were way too many easy looks tonight. And the interior defense was just horrible. I said this on social media during the game, and a guy named Nash on Twitter came at me and was like, are you insane? I mean, maybe. But I actually thought the energy level on defense was okay tonight. Like I felt like the guys were active. They were moving around. They were trying to use their hands and get deflections. But this team is so bad at rotations, and I don't understand it. It's one of the many confounding things about them because it's a very experienced group, right? I mean, Emmanuel Miller's been around for a long time. Avery Anderson's been around forever. Micah Peavy's in his third full season playing. We go down the list. You got a lot of transfers that have come in and returning players that have played a lot of basketball. And they just let guys run free. I mean, the weak side help defense is not there. And so Utah State got easy layup after easy layup. There was one stretch of play about midway through the first half where it was like every possession, the Aggies were running, a back screen and just throwing a lob up. And either it was, the guy that was running to the rim would catch it and finish, or even on plays where they mishandled the pass and dropped the ball, still somehow the bounce would go their way and they would knock it down. But the defense was bad tonight. Doug chimed in and said, I didn't think the defense was strong at all. No, it wasn't. And that's been like one of the hallmarks of this team, along with the fact that they can go through some prolonged scoring droughts. They're not a great shooting club. They also just aren't very good on the defense side of the ball. And that's been something that Jamie Dixon's, hanged his hat on for a long time. And honestly, like the identity of his team traditionally have been, it's kind of a rough watch on offense, but they defend so well and they buy in and they play hard. And so they can make up for that. And they can stay in just about any game because of what they do defensively. But this team, they were not good on defense, and they weren't really good on defense all year long. He said after the Big 12 tournament, he thought they made some strides in that area, but they did not look ready for this Utah State team tonight, and the Aggies kind of did whatever they wanted. They started hitting some threes in the second half. It felt like a night where they could have scored 100 points if they really wanted to. Things sort of slowed down for them at the end of the ball game, but honestly, like they could have just called the number. They were getting good looks all night long. The help defense was bad. The rotations were bad, and whether it was looks around the rim or kicking it back out and getting an open three, all night it just felt like Utah State could kind of do what they wanted on the offensive side of the ball. I said on Thursday's show that the X factors for this TCU team, because if they were going to make a run in the NCAA tournament, they were going to have to do some things that were uncharacteristic because they struggled and sort of limped to the finish at the end of the season. Guys that really had to step up: Trey Tennyson, Chuck O'Bannon, Jacoby Coles. And the reason I mentioned those three guys were because those are the guys on this roster that I feel like have the ability to stretch the floor and change the gravity of the defense and hit threes, hit shots, hit jump shots from beyond the arc, and force, defenses to respect that part of the game. Trey was 1 of 3 from the field. He didn't attempt a 3-point shot. He had 2 points. And honestly, like, Trey just didn't look like he had a ton of confidence tonight. And I hate that for him. I mean, he was having a really good season. The last month or so has been tough sledding for him. But there were a couple times where he had open looks in the first half, and he just wasn't looking for his own shot. Chuck O'Bannon really struggled. Didn't give him great minutes tonight. Had a rough shot off the side of the backboard. Wasn't hitting open threes. Made a few plays on defense, but overall it just wasn't his night either. And then Jacoby Coles actually, I think, was TCU's best player tonight. He was 6 of 15 from the field, finished with 19 points. He was 3 of 4 from 3. He shot the ball pretty well. He also got inside the paint and did some different things. But overall, just no consistency on the offensive side of the ball. They got off to a nice start. Jameer Nelson Jr. hit a 3 early in that ball game. And if you notice, if you're watching the broadcast, one of the first things they said, and it was a good team tonight, it was Kevin Harlan, Stan Van Gundy. And one of the first things they said was Utah State is a man-to-man defensive team. That's what they run. That's what they do. And about midway through the first half, Danny Sprinkle changes it up, and he says, okay, we're going to run a 1-3-1 zone. And he was basically daring TCU to shoot the ball. And Micah Peavy hit his first, they hit their first 3 coming out of that action. Micah Peavy hit a 3 from the left wing. And then after that, the first scoring drought of the game started. And they had 3 pretty prolonged scoring droughts through this basketball game that hurt them. And the first one was in the first half. And they were able to sort of survive that by playing decently well on the defensive side of the ball. Utah State missed a few shots too, but eventually it caught up to them. They ended up trailing by 6 at halftime, but they didn't really have a great answer. And Utah State wasn't in the zone all the time. They did a nice job of changing up their looks. They would throw some zone defense out there, and they'd go back to man-to-man. But TCU just did not have an answer for it. Overall, shooting the basketball, they finished 31% from 3, 7 of 22. Utah State was 42% from 3, 8 of 19. They shot 55% on the game. I mean, they just got what they wanted. And so much of it, as I said earlier, was in the interior. I mean, they just lived and feasted off getting points in the paint. And in the second half, especially, TCU's offense just looked really discombobulated. Frogs really need more of an interior scoring option. And I don't know where that's going to come from. Ernest Uday right now, I like some of the things that he does, but he is really just, on the offensive side of the ball, he is basically just a lob threat. I mean, it's rolling to the rim hard, and if it's not there for him to catch and finish around the rim, then he doesn't really have a whole lot else that he's going to be able to do. At one point late in the shot clock tonight, he caught the ball in the post, and you could just tell he didn't want anything to do with that. Like, he didn't want to have the ball in his hands. He wasn't interested. He kicked out Avery Anderson, who tried to force up a three late in the shot clock and really was just trying to force a foul, and that didn't work. And so rough night all around, for TCU as they fall to Utah State 88-72. I do want to mention, and maybe I'll get to that in the next segment. I want to talk more about, that was tonight, and we'll kind of weave in and out of this, but I also want to talk about where this program is. I know a lot of people are frustrated with the fact that this is another early tournament exit this year. Don't even get past the first round. Last few years, they were at least able to win a game before. And if you want to, here on YouTube, or you can tweet at me at SimcockSteven. I'll also try to take a look at that. Coming up next, though, we'll talk about kind of big picture, where we're at with the basketball program, what next year could look like. That's all coming up here on Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day. One of our new sponsors, Manscaped. You can get 20% off and free shipping if you use the code LOCKEDON at manscaped.com. Have you been looking for the right product to help with your grooming routines? They have a 5th-generation trimmer that features 2 interchangeable skin-safe blade heads that will work wherever you need to shave or wherever your heart desires. It also features dual LED spotlights to guide you through the darkest winter debris. Navigate with confidence with these razors. If you hate making a mess, no worry. This is a waterproof razor. You can shave in the shower, in the bath, wherever you need to. And they also have beard hedgers, pro kit, face shavers, so you can clean up your face as well, whether you're looking to craft your signature look or clean up that neckline. These are always the right tools for the job. Again, get 20% off and free shipping with the code LOCKEDON at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with the code LOCKEDON at manscaped.com. Get spring cleaning going with Manscaped. Also want to talk about the Game Time app. If you need tickets, you should download the Game Time app today. Do it now and use the promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off tickets for sporting events, comedy shows, theater productions, whatever it is, whatever you're interested in. Download the Game Time app today. Again, use that promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off. One great thing about the Game Time app, they show you exactly what the view is from your seat when you click on the seat. They have flash deals, last-minute pricing. So if you procrastinate, or it's hey, I didn't know this person was coming to Fort Worth or Dallas or whatever the case may be, I want to get tickets, you can do that at Game Time on the Game Time app. Again, download the Game Time app today. Use the promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Game Time app. It is fantastic. It's the best place on the secondary market to get tickets. Doug chimed in again and said best run and most fun season was his first year with the NIT run. Jamie Dixon has set high expectations that haven't been met. I mean, I don't really want to get into the weeds about what the best run was. I think that team that took Arizona to the wire, that was a fun group. Like they really hit their stride late in the season, and they got a big win over Seton Hall and then took Arizona to the buzzer. But let's talk about it. I know it's on a lot of your minds. Where are we at with this? Because this is the third straight year that TCU's been bounced in the opening weekend of the tournament. And yes, historically, I don't want to be dismissive of this. Making the tournament's a big deal. It's not something that TCU has done a lot. First time ever they've made it 3 years in a row. They've won a couple games over the past few years, got up into today by Utah State, but that's an accomplishment. He has raised the floor of this program significantly. When he got here, Trent Johnson had improved things a little bit, but they were still way off from being competitive. And he almost immediately won the NIT. Next year they made the tournament. And then from there had a few tough seasons, but bounced back with Mike Miles and company and started making regular appearances in the NCAA tournament. And this is one of the toughest questions in college sports to answer. At what point do you say, okay, how much longer can we be patient? The results are the results. Have we reached the ceiling of what TCU basketball could be under Jamie Dixon's watch? I mean, it does feel like we're in a hamster wheel of breezing through a cupcake non-conference schedule, going 500 in Big 12 play, getting between a 6 and a 9 seed in the tournament, maybe winning a game, and then getting bounced. I feel like TCU has to decide, what do they want their program to be? How much do they want to invest in basketball? Because would it be a risk if Jamie took another job or they decide to part ways and they hired a new coach? Yes, it would be a risk. However, basketball is one of those sports. One, you can get good really quickly. I mean, these are different situations because these are mid-majors, but McNeese State, who also lost in the first round of the tournament today, Will Wade goes there, gets some guys in the transfer portal, they're immediately good. Danny Sprinkle, they returned 0 points and 0 rebounds from last year's Utah State team. It was his first year at Utah State. He works the portal really well. They end up winning the Mountain West. They win their first round game. I don't know what they're going to do against Purdue, but that looks like a pretty well-coached team. This was a very experienced group. I'll be honest, going into the year, I didn't have super high expectations for this TCU team. I thought they were, lacking some talent. I just didn't think they were going to really hold up in the Big 12. And so in some ways, I feel like they sort of overachieved. My question at this point is, it's very clear that Jamie has a pretty distinct style, a type of player that he recruits, athletic, long, able to get out in transition, make things happen. Not a lot of great shooters. Okay. Now, Trey Tennyson this year was supposed to be the guy, and he was for a while, and then things cooled off. Jacoby Coles is a pretty consistent shooter. Next season, you're talking about really an entirely different team. Emmanuel Miller will be moving on. And I just want to take a minute to say, Emmanuel Miller is one of my favorite Frogs of all time. He's great. He did everything right. He was super consistent. And I'm going to miss watching him play basketball because he worked his tail off. He improved a lot. And all these guys did. Micah Peavy's improved a ton. I don't really know what his pro prospects are. I still don't think he's a supernatural shooter. I mean, he's a great defender. And with his athleticism, he can do some things on offense. He's become a better spot-up shooter. I know Steven Johnson, the beat reporter from Fort Worth Star-Telegram, said at one point this year that people would be surprised how much buzz he's getting from NBA circles. If that's the case, I would expect him to probably move on. Chuck O'Bannon's going to be moving on. It's his last run no matter what. Jacoby Coles has a decision to make. You've got some freshmen this year in Jace Posey and Isaiah Manning that will hopefully be ready to rock and roll next season. You got a good recruiting class coming in this next season, and they'll once again load up in the transfer portal and try to replace, Avery Anderson, Chuck O'Bannon, maybe Jameer Nelson Jr. The list goes on. So if it were me, I would say, all right, you got another kind of core group of players. You got one more year to figure this out and see if you can make a run. But I totally get where people are at and where their frustrations are. And I know when we talk about what would happen if for some reason Jamie moved on and they had to hire a new coach, one common refrain that people get at is, well, who are you going to go get that's going to be better? And my response to that would be, and I'm not in favor, I think Jamie's earned the right to get after it one more time with a different group of players. But my response to that would be, this is a much better job than it was a decade ago. I mean, yes, when Trent Johnson took the job and they were coming in the Big 12 and they were playing in the old DMC and there was no history here, yes, this was one of the worst jobs in college basketball. It just was. I mean, I feel like at this point, TCU has shown a commitment both with facilities and NIL that they are willing to compete. And, they've been at least competitive in the toughest basketball conference in America for the last 5 years. So I feel like it'd be a very attractive job opening. Like, I don't know who they'd go after if it came to that, but this is not like this is not the TCU job it was when they were in the Mountain West or early in Big 12 play. When they hired Jamie, that was a huge win for the program. And honestly, like, his ties to the school, being an alum, his ties to Fort Worth, and the fact that Pitt was ready to move on, it all kind of culminated in a perfect storm for him to get here. But this is a much better job now than it was even 5-6 years ago. And so I'll be curious to see what happens. But again, I don't want to be like blasé about the fact that they're in a much better place than they were. But again, I totally understand the frustration of, kind of revisiting and circling back to we're still here. We're still in the same spot that we've been in for the past 2 seasons. And that's a tough pill to swallow as a fan. We'll wrap things up when we come back. Thanks for joining me here on this live show. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Nissan, get your next big adventure. Shop now at NissanUSA.com. They have 3 new 2024 SUV models. They're out on the market: Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada. Whether it's passion, style, performance, whatever you're looking for, Nissan can get it done. Getting those 2024 models, again, Pathfinder, Rogue, or Armada to go on your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. One of the big upsets of the tournament so far, Oakland over Kentucky. They are this week's Nissan Rogue. The team absolutely surprised us all with a powerful performance in the first-round upset against the Kentucky Wildcats, giving them their biggest win in program history. Win life, go Rogue, and that's exactly what the Golden Grizzlies have done so far in this tournament. Shop NissanUSA.com. Again, that website, NissanUSA.com. So if you're just joining us tonight, Utah State beats TCU 88-72. Frogs just had an atrocious night defensively. Gave up pretty much everything in the paint. There were mismatches all night long. Utah State did a good job of hunting them, finding open guys, and getting it done. They also shot the ball really well from 3 tonight. And then offensively, again, a pretty inconsistent night. And I think it was a good example of an issue that we've talked about a lot this year. They just never really had a go-to guy. I mean, there's some nice players on this team, but in a crunch when you needed a bucket, it was always sort of all right, who's got the hot hand on this given night? Tonight was Jacoby Coles. But they didn't really have great individual playmakers who could break down the defense even when things were tight. And Utah State went to a zone early in the first half and essentially dared them to shoot the basketball. And they didn't really have much of an answer. And so they kind of switched back and forth between that and their man coverages, but they really got after them with that zone defense and allowed TCU to take open threes, and the Frogs just could not hit them tonight. The TCU basketball season comes to an end in the first round of the NCAA tournament. We'll have plenty of coverage of basketball. Baseball, they get a 1-0 win over Oklahoma State tonight. Peyton Tolle, complete game shutout. Really impressive effort by him. We'll see if they can find a way to win that series. And spring football practice starts today because it's after midnight. So all that and more coming up on Locked On Horned Frogs this week. Thank you for joining me for this live edition of the show. It's your team. We do it here every day.